Holocaust denial strikes me as one of the strangest positions to get yourself into.
But it shouldn't be arrestable, should it? We're supposed to have these fully fleshed answers, and we're come down on one side. Free speech is really difficult, and if it wasn't difficult, we would. I mean, right now we live in an anomaly of time where we have this kind of free speech and liberty, and we're so complacent. We're so complacent. If it wasn't difficult and complex, they would have had it for thousands of years everywhere. The reason they don't is because it's so hard.
Welcome to Thinkers on Times Radio. It's a show where we try and spend a little bit longer, take on some big ideas, have a nuanced conversation, and try to get to the bottom of things. We might not always agree, but we want to try and find profitable ways of disagreeing if we possibly can. We've had some great guests on this show, and today's is no exception to that. It's Andrew Gold, journalist, author of the book The Psychology of Secrets, which is a brilliant title for a book. It's a brilliant book. It's an investigation into why people can keep secrets, what sort of secrets they keep, and what it means for how they conduct themselves within society. He's also the host of the podcast Heretics, designed, according to him, for those who go against the pack and choose to speak on the unconventional and taboo, mostly at their own risk. Andrew, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about the book, but let's start with Heretics, because I'm really interested in the idea, because at one level, a heretic is a noble intellectual fighting against the grain for positive reasons. And yet to others, including some descriptions of people who appear on your show, it's just people who are contrarians or people who are just wrong.
Yeah.
How do you draw a distinction between someone who is just wrong and someone who might be fighting against the grain and whose opinion is worth listening to?
That's a great question, actually, and you sort of can't in the moment. I think it's really hard to know. There are so many, there's this ongoing narrative of history's going to look bad look backwards at you. You're not going to look good in history. It's like, who the hell? What kind of entitlement leads you to?
It's so
think
annoying
that?
when people say that, isn't it? You're on the wrong side of history on trans rights or Israel or whatever, and it's an arrogance that even raises that question, because who knows?
And from the perspective of which future, in which country, in which society, in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, they'll all have different opinions about today's history, which will be revised and changed, and they'll all be watching AI and won't know who was what. I think a monkey was in charge of the United States or whatever. But yeah, it's a really hard one. So I guess in with respect to that, you try and do that sort of Bertrand Russell, just try and be true. Look for what is true, but then what is true and what is not true. It's really, really hard. But try as much as possible to stay with true. That's why I sort of went against that trans ideology. It starts with trans women are women. Well, I think, okay, that's a nice idea. Maybe I'm sort of tempted by that idea, but it's not true. Okay, I'm going to stick with what's true, because only then might this be somewhere towards some sort of moral conviction. I don't know. And it's also true that on my podcast, sometimes they are just anti-woke guests.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily heretical in any kind of wonderful way. They're not all brilliant guests. Some of them afterwards I go, oh, that was a bit of a disappointment. Sometimes they are even better than I thought. So it's really hard. I suppose the kind of heretic that I'm really interested in is somebody who's able to keep one foot in one tribe. Because if you're heretical against one tribe, if you go back to evolutionary biology, our tribes and things, and you say something wrong, you're out on the savannah. So I mean, it alone to die. I mean, it's painful because of that. Obviously, that evolutionary process. Our bodies make it painful to disagree with the crowd, because our bodies are telling us, don't say the wrong thing. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll be out and you'll be dead. So
conformity is an evolutionary tactic, because if you conform, you're part of the society. If you're part of the society, you can breed, and your genetics will be passed on. So actually, not conforming is an evolutionary disadvantage.
I think so.
Although, I suppose if that was true, then we would have only conformist thinkers.
So what if you can not conform in such a way that you're able to remain in the tribe and still be admired, while also giving out kinds of interesting views that change where the tribe might go and they might succeed. So it makes sense. You need to have some original thinkers in that tribe. So if I think about heretics, I was just thinking before coming on now, who is someone who's able to stay very much in the main group and still be a little bit different? And I think of someone like Jimmy Carr, who's surrounded by celebrities who I might consider to be ideologues or people who haven't thought too much about things, and yet he's just a little bit different, and he won't necessarily go along with that crowd. Tom York released a statement about Israel the other day, and he got killed for it by the sort of pro-Palestine side. But what was lost in that was he was incredibly critical of Israel in that message, but also of Hamas. And that was enough to get him sort of hammered by one side.
I find that so interesting about Tom York. So I read that statement as well. And some of this, I suppose, is I want a heretic to be clever enough to defend their own position, even if I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether that's what the world has lost a little bit, that it's okay to disagree. That phrase, good people can disagree.
Yeah.
And have we lost that because of social media? Probably. Have we lost it because you talk about what's true? I'm very struck by the political world, particularly in America. It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what you assert. So the world of Trump, and some of your listeners won't like this, I would imagine, because they might well be Trumpians because they feel they're against the establishment. Some. But Trump has sort of proof that the truth doesn't matter. It's the tribe and what you assert that matters.
Absolutely, the sloganeering of the sloganization of politics. And so before doing Heretics, and I talk a bit right in the book about it. But I used to do a lot on cults. Sort of people who left Scientology and the Hasidic Jews and Islam, and I tend to be quite critical of those cults. But one thing that I noticed they all do, if you want to argue with someone who's in the cult, they have these thought-terminating cliches, which is basically a slogan. So Scientology, they're a shortcut. It's a mental shortcut, so you don't have to actually defend your position. You just say, as a Scientologist, well, you're a suppressive person. That is code for you're an outsider.
Yeah.
You're that guy who's out of our tribe and we're kicking out the tribe, so we don't even have to listen to you. And it's amazing. We all do it. Yeah. So on that pro-Palestine side, it might be just like apartheid. And it's like, do you actually know what you're saying? Or I've been just people shout at me on the street, Zionist at me. And I've said to one person, I remember saying, do you know what that means? And she didn't have a clue.
No.
And both
just
sides,
an insult.
Yeah, both sides do it. My side would go like, oh, you're just being woke. And it means I don't have to think about what that woke argument is. And it might, or maybe it's not a woke, it might be a very good argument. So that seems to be a mental shortcut, terminates any thought, and we shout them out, we feel good. And the problem is everybody else on our side thinks that's enough as well. So they just clap, 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 and that's it.
We did a thing on my breakfast show on Times Radio about genocide. We got a genocide scholar to explain the 5 tests of genocide and the extent to which Israel has committed genocide. And we also asked, has Hamas committed genocide as well? Now, Hamas has genocidal intent. Part of the Hamas ideology is the extinction of Jews. That's clearly genocidal. But one question about genocide is the extent to which you can reasonably be felt to succeed. So Hamas attacking on October the 7th is an act of terror. It might have an act of genocidal intent, but it was unlikely to wipe off Jews from the face of a particular area, partly or totally. Whereas Israel in Gaza, via blockades, via starvation, via mass bombing, some people would say meets the test of genocide. I only raise the point because I think it's interesting. It's interesting intellectually. I think it's interesting. It's important that we try and wrestle with this stuff. But some people got to say you were being anti-Semitic even asking the question.
Yeah. Well, because there are so many people who haven't thought about it as deeply as you have, who instantly will start shouting genocide. I think the apartheid one is particularly absurd because I've been to Israel so many times. I mean, I think some people listening right now would be shocked to know that 20% of Israel is Muslim, right? And that those people make up parts of their parliament, parts of their football teams, parts of their celebrity culture. That most Jews are not white in Israel. Yeah. That's also white colonialists. Well, 55% or 60% of Jews in Israel are Sephardi. So they're so wrong on that. And then you go, okay, well, what else might you be wrong about? And if you're just throwing out genocide, and especially when they sort of do the comparisons with the Holocaust, I mean, I was told for years that even before Gaza, what was happening in Gaza, this was a concentration camp. They were living in a concentration camp. But constantly we're now shown, before October 7th, Gaza was this kind of holiday resort. The same people showing that. It was this beautiful beach. Obviously, there were problems. I'm not suggesting there weren't at all. So that's why a lot of particularly Jewish people are sitting there going, hang on. These are thought-terminating cliches you're throwing at us. With regards to genocide, if Israel wanted to wipe off all Palestinians from the map, they could quite easily do so. That's
such an interesting point, though. But I think the flip side is also true, which is that they're trying to have their own thought-ending cliche, which is that if you say genocide, you're... I remember having a debate with a member of the Israeli government where I was talking about how the hostage families were not happy with the way Netanyahu was behaving. And he said to me, you're just parroting Hamas. And I was like, no, I'm parroting hostage families. I was quoting directly what hostage families felt about Netanyahu's government. And if you can't criticize Netanyahu... And again, I think a good person, a plausible person who's thought about it carefully could say, here are the tests for genocide, here is the conduct of Israel, here are the statements of some members of the government. Taken together, you can make the plausible case for genocide. You can still believe that and believe that Israel has a right to exist, to believe that Israel and Jewishness are not the same thing, to want to support Jews around the world, to recognize that Jewish history is a long history of persecution and pogrom, and to be anti-Semitism. All of those things can be possible. But I guess what you're saying is you've got to be able to hold competing views in your mind and have one foot in the tribe and one foot out of the tribe sometimes. In fact, anyone who's 100% in a tribe is probably wrong.
Well, that's true. And I think everything you've said is utterly sensible. If you look at that Tom York statement, who was it that was up in arms really about that? It was the sort of pro-Hamas, or not pro, they would say they're the sort of pro-Gaza or the Israel genocide side. The Jews loved it. The Jews were going, finally. Yeah. But Tom York came down so hard on Israel, and in doing so, basically equated Israel to a terrorist organization whose founding charter was, we want to kill the Jews, which is an awful thing to do. But we're so used to a media, in particular celebrity landscape, that will just come down so heavily against Israel and not mention Hamas that we breathed a sigh of relief. So that anti-Semitism, I understand totally, and there'll be people listening going, yeah, why can't we criticize Israel? It's a thought-terminating cliche, and you're just calling everything anti-Semitic. That is frustrating, and I understand those frustrations. From a Jewish point of view, and I know Jews in Israel are different things, but I think 95% of Jews are pro-Israel or something like that.
Really, as high as that, do you think?
It's very high, because we grow up without being too victim-y with this feeling of if something goes wrong, we need this backup. And they can't be, I mean, the accusation all the time, an anti-Semitic one about the Holocaust, is the Jews were almost inhumanely or unhuman-like in their lack of fighting back. That's always said. It's not true. They fought back a lot, but it's often said.
Does people seriously say that?
Oh, it's a common sort of, I suppose, a right-wing talking point about Jews. They're these weird, nebbish Woody Allen characters who don't fight back.
So when they were rounded up on the trains to go to Belsen or Auschwitz, they should have resisted. They were docile and just sort of accepted their fate.
Yeah, something not unhuman about those Jews who just sort of walked into the camps.
What an awful thing to even begin to think about.
Well, of course.
I always find that in all of these things that, Holocaust denial strikes me as one of the strangest positions to get yourself into.
But it shouldn't be arrestable, should it? Because I lived in Germany.
Well, that's an interesting point. Well, let's get on to that. I'm interested because deplatforming is a massive issue. Your podcast talks about people who might be otherwise deplatformed. Yeah, so Mein Kampf has only just been made legal in Germany. And if you buy the Mein Kampf, you have to buy this amazing edition with debunking all around it. It's almost got this like protective layer around it. So it's gone from every married couple in Germany during the Nazi period got given Mein Kampf to you can't buy it at all to you can only buy it if there's a 500-page surrounding text telling you how awful it is.
Right.
But I think you should be able to read Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
And I think you should be able to deny the Holocaust. But is Germany different? Does Germany need to pay for its sins and fight against, the German state was responsible for the Holocaust. So maybe denying the Holocaust in Germany is more dangerous than denying the Holocaust in Britain or America.
It's so hard. We're supposed to, and I'm sure you're on side with this, we're supposed to have these fully fleshed answers and we're, come down on one side. Free speech is really difficult. And if it wasn't difficult, we would, right now we live in an anomaly of time where we have this kind of free speech and liberty, and we're so complacent. We're so complacent. If it wasn't difficult and complex, they would have had it for thousands of years everywhere. The reason they don't is because it's so hard. And, what the hell do you do? You're only allowing this book if there are people telling you how bad it. That sounds mental to me. But I totally get what you're saying in Germany. I mean,
arguably Germany's done a very good job. I mean, people look at Germany as a case in point for a country that has managed to wrestle with its troublesome past. I mean, in terms of reparations, in terms of museums, in terms of the culture that stands against it. Now, some people think Germany's a model for that sort of approach too. They did the worst thing you could possibly imagine not that long ago, and they've taken steps to acknowledge it.
You have to be very careful though, because I lived in Germany for a few years, and there was definitely there was a feeling emerging among young Germans of like, this wasn't me, and it annoys them, and they're going to push back. I mean, this whole the trans thing that's been happening the last 5-10 years, the favourable, how people felt about trans before that was significantly better. They were significantly more positive. So if you shove things down people's throat and say things that are not true sometimes, or you push too hard, every action has a reaction. And so I'm just concerned. I don't know. I don't have an answer for what they should be doing in Germany. I don't like that it's only annotated. I also think, and I guess this is another sort of sensationalist talking point, but anti-Semitism's gone up rapidly in Germany and around Europe, and that has coincided with immigration of a lot of people from Muslim countries. Pew Research will find that 97 to 99% of Muslims in Pakistan and several other countries, sort of more in the Middle East, have unfavorable views of Jews. We move more of those people who have unfavorable views of Jews into the UK every year than we have Jews themselves. So we're sitting around going like, I don't think if this happens again to us, I mean, my little sister goes to a Jewish school. The security there is insane.
Yeah.
It is like fenced off. Security is
Which is
mad.
Which is mad in Britain,
Yeah.
where, you know, in America, there's quite a lot of security in lots of schools. But we don't
Yeah.
live in a country where people are watching this not in Britain.
Yeah. And we know
We don't have security. We have some inner city schools where they do knife checks, but we don't live in a culture by which school is seen as a dangerous place.
Exactly. But for my sister, that was a reality. I didn't, you know, I'm not religious. I'm an atheist. I'm so happy I didn't go to a Jewish school. I went to another, you know, just everyone and everything, and I liked that. But that's where she went. A lot of the times, the religious schools, whichever religion it is, they tend to be sort of better schools, and that's, I think, why my sister went to one of those. But it's mad. But we know, the Jewish people know. They're sitting around going, okay, when is this going to happen again? Sort of the never again stuff, you know,
Yeah.
Germany. And it doesn't look to us, we might be wrong, it doesn't look like yesterday's war again. It doesn't look like the far right that Tommy Robinson, who is pro-Israel, by the way, and very pro-Jewish, it doesn't look like those guys, or the far right or anyone, are going to come for the Jews suddenly.
You had him on, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm interested in Tommy Robinson because I've talked to Elon Musk's dad on the programme about it. He's very pro Tommy Robinson without fully understanding Tommy Robinson. So is he a heretic or is he a moron? To some people, he's an oracle because he tells it how it is. And he's a heretic because he says widespread immigration isn't a good thing. Although that's almost an orthodoxy in British politics now. Most people now are talking about controlled immigration.
But he was saying it before.
So did he help affect that change? Did Donald Trump help affect that change? Did Nigel Farage help affect that change? I'm sure they're all debatable points. But to me, Tommy Robinson isn't coherent enough to be a heretic. He's a chancer and he's done some terrible things. And he's done some terrible things for terrible reasons. Now, should he be on your show? I presume you wrestled with that. Do we want him on my show?
I wrestled with it for a while, a long time actually. And I tried to find examples of him being prejudiced against a group of people due to their immutable features. And I could not find one single occasion of that. And by the way, you know, he grew up in sort of the boxing clubs of a working class area where you would be a bit more jokey with people's races and things like that. He's got, you know...
I don't want to be snobby about him because that's important. That, you know,
that's the concern.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism.
Would you have Douglas Murray on here? And what does he say that's so different to what Tommy Robinson says, except for, you know, with an education?
I think Douglas Murray hasn't libelled a refugee for reasons of politics and then repeated the libel.
Tommy believes that, and that's a very complicated thing. We took that out of my interview because I didn't want to get involved in that. And if this kid, which the judges, you know, was bullied, that is horrific.
And
Tommy, he's not lying for the sake of it. He might be wrong.
Yeah.
And he quite possibly is wrong, but he believes it. Tommy grew up, his cousin was was taken by a rape gang, drugged, all sorts of horrible things happened. He grew up in Luton. There was one mosque. He gave that talk at Oxford Student Union, which was another point to me of, well, he's been at Oxford Union, surely I can have him on.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he's gone through. That's his life as a working class Brit that many people are now experiencing. That when I had Ian Dale on the show the other day, who's wonderful, really, really good, but he said, well, you know, I walk around Tunbridge Wells and maybe there's a Muslim here or there and everything's totally fine. And it's like, you know, a lot of people, I think quite rightly said, well, hang on, mate, like that's not what most of the country is going through. And Tommy speaks for a lot of people.
And I think that's a very fair argument. And it's, you know, and you look at Brexit, where I used to have a phone-in show on a different radio station, and definitely there were people who felt that the media didn't understand what their lives were like.
Yeah.
And so there is a responsibility of people with platforms like you to have people on. There's a danger though, isn't it? Because are there people you wouldn't have on?
I wrestle with it. I wrestle with it every day because sometimes I find myself talking with my guest booker and I'm saying, no, I don't want him. And then my guest booker says, why? Why not? And I sort of...
It's a good test. We do it on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
And we have slightly different things because it's your show. And so I'm working for Times Radio. The Times Radio is the Times newspaper. So therefore there's brand issues. There's your audience have certain expectations and you don't want to pander to an audience, but you don't want to also over-provoke an audience in a way that wouldn't be helpful to you either. I mean, that's a tension for all of us who do anything. But it's a good lesson, isn't it, to say, would you have X on?
It is,
and try and work out why you wouldn't.
And you make a really good point about sort of the difference between that kind of mainstream and the alternative or the independent. I think that's the point of it, because obviously the independent media, which I'd include myself in, we're sort of accused often of disinformation and those kinds of things, and I get it, and we try not to, but the fact is we don't have a team of fact checkers like the BBC will have, although I think they still get it wrong. We don't have lawyers checking everything, and those same advertisers and things like that. And sometimes it means there will be more just nutters on YouTube who just say whatever and don't really care. I really do care, and I hope I get it right. And when I get it wrong, you can go into the YouTube video after and cut something out. But at the same time, so that's the disadvantage of the independent media. But on the other side, I mean, you guys, not necessarily you, but the BBC, I mean Channel 4, are much more likely to fall into the kind of groupthink, which has led them for years to say like women can have penises. And I'm not doing a low blow. I know that's a low blow, but the reason is because that's, to me, the most obviously ludicrous.
Did you want to get dragged in it? Because I mean, I also think, because I've been around the trans issue for a very long time and spoken to both sides an awful lot. My view is always, as a man, it's relatively easy to be liberal because it doesn't affect us. Because we don't need safe spaces. We don't have areas where you need to sort of segregate men. But so there's more at stake for women. It strikes me as an obvious point. I've met trans people who just want to be left alone. That seems to be a very correct and plausible thing. There's clearly places where the rights of women and the rights of trans people come into conflict. You've got to make a decision, which is more important. So in sport, it strikes me that if you were born biologically male, you shouldn't compete against people who are born biologically female. I don't think that's terrible to say that, but you're right. I wonder whether the problem for diversity as an issue, and we've seen this in Trump's America, is, and I've put this to people who they don't agree with what I'm about to say, so I should flag that up. I've put this to people in the diversity area, they don't agree with me. They've overreached. They've gone into areas they didn't need to go into. So if they are saying there are 35 different types of sexuality and we need 35 different flags, or if they're saying defund the police because we don't need the police, what you're doing there is you're provoking a bunch of people and you're taking people too far down a road they don't want to go down. And what will happen then? You're going to get a counter reaction that you won't like. So I believe in equality. I believe in equality of opportunity. But the people making that argument have also gone so far that it makes it harder to support them, and they've not taken the crowd with them.
Absolutely. And I'd go back to that point I made about free speech. I'd say it applies to liberal values. I'd consider myself a liberal. You clearly are as well. By which I mean, as much as possible, individual liberty. If you want to dress as a woman, if you want to be a Christian who believes in all of these things, or a Muslim, or all of those things, as much as possible, but providing it doesn't interfere with other people. That gets really complicated, though, because it's not as simple as...
Because there are some moments where it does interfere.
Yeah, and not just... I mean, the obvious one, trans women are playing in the sports with whatever, but also, by, as I said before, importing a large number of people who individually... They're all right. They go down to the mosque or whatever it might be. But as a large group, 52% or 53% want homosexuality to be outlawed. So what effect does that have on gay people? Yeah. An amazing number, I've noticed this recently, of my guests appear to be gay. They don't just appear to be gay, they are gay. Yeah. I think gay people are severely affected by what is going on with both Islam and the trans thing. So and then what, are we all homophobes then or something?
Well, I spoke to Roxane Gay on this programme and she was calling people bigots. And I was saying to her that there's a danger there that again, good people can disagree. And everyone has rights and everyone needs rights, but none of them are absolute. And free speech isn't absolute either. No. If someone came on your programme and said, I think Britain is for white people, it's one thing. Tasteless, I wouldn't agree with it, but and therefore X should happen to people who aren't white. There's a point at which you'd say killing the microphone. I've
had these debates because a strange thing has had to as much as I'd like to believe we're all in like a one foot in one tribe and so on, and everyone's very, there are these tribes, and what seems to have happened is on the sort of progressive left, as they call it, there's this kind of, it became very authoritarian very quickly the last 5-10 years. So there are loads of us who would see ourselves as classical liberals in terms of like any colour of people, who cares, or all the stuff. And there's also sort of far right ethno-nationalists, and we sort of merged almost to defeat another. So I go to these events and there are people who do talk a lot about white English and being white English, and I don't agree.
And people think you're a right-wing headbanger.
Yeah, a lot of people do if they don't think too much into it, don't look into it much. It doesn't help that YouTube titles, you have to be a little bit sensationalist. What I've started doing is actually putting the sensationalist one in the first few weeks while it gains traction, because you just have to, otherwise you can't. And then I change it to
But that's the problem with the world, like we do. I mean, look, Times Radio YouTube has gone from nothing to quite successful, and we will use grabby stuff.
Trump
grabs people.
Yeah. Quite literally.
He grabs people literally, and let's not say where he grabs it by, but anyway, the point is, and that's been I've worked in traditional media for 20 years. I know you've been associated with traditional media in the past. And therefore, all the accusations that used to be made about tabloid, or the dreadfully sensationalist, is true or more true for the non-traditional media.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the mainstream media gets a beating from the newcomers, as if there's a purity away from the commerciality of the mainstream media. But it strikes me that you exchange one form of impurity for another, which is the economy of social media is being grabby and sensationalizing. And that can be as dangerous as anything else, any other pressure that's put on a media organisation.
I've had this conversation with other YouTubers, and it's something we worry about, because I guess people hear the word YouTuber. It's never something that I thought I'd be one day. YouTube is such a strange thing to be. And we don't like it. I think people might think, oh, you're a bunch of, like Mr. Beast and all the sort of teenagey things. Yeah. We're going to get more views. But we do sit there and go, gosh, this is frustrating.
Yeah.
And the difference isn't like, let's say you get a video, and you'll know this, like a video that maybe my typical videos have a base rate of about 100,000. They never go under that, and they go up to sort of 1 million or so views. And people might think, oh, if you made a more nuanced title there and didn't put Tommy Robinson's face on it or something like that, maybe you'd only get 90,000 instead of 100,000. And it's not the case. You get 1,000.
Yeah, and that's YouTube's fault.
I think so. And they deny this.
Yeah.
They say, I've seen them talk about this, they say that every video you put out is unique to itself. It doesn't matter who you are, blah, blah, blah. It's palpably not true. You get an audience, you get 100,000 subscribers, say. I got 420,000 in a year and a half of going. And these are people who all signed up because they saw me talk about things that were sort of anti-woke. Now, if I put something out now, like I would like to do, because I'm a vegan, saying, I love veganism, we shouldn't, it would die. Not only would it die, it would get like 100 views.
You should come on your own podcast as a vegan.
Interview myself.
Yeah, interview yourself as a. So, are you a vegan activist, or are you just someone who is a vegan?
I'm a vegan, and I spoke at a great festival called Vegan Camp Out recently. And I spoke to the people, and I said, you're not going to convince people by sending them photos of disgusting things, because that short circuits the brain and they close their eyes. Yeah. If you really care and you want fewer animals dying and those kinds of things, which I do, then try and appeal to them by just being reasonable and telling them how great, and you understand them, and we all understand each other. And most people then, meat eaters, are very reasonable. Yeah. And we have this discussion.
So, I mean, there's an argument. I'm a meat eater, but not that much of a meat eater. But there's an argument that I was saying there's something. We're trying to work out what in 50 years would people not be able to imagine we did. There's a couple of there's a couple of candidates, because for thousands of years human beings didn't lock each other up. The punishments that were given, they were either financial or they chop bits off you or beat you up.
Right.
Prison was a place you were put while they could do other stuff to you. And then really from the 18th century, end of the 18th century, Victorian period onward, incarceration, they had to build prisons. The great Victorian idea of a prison is a Victorian idea. It's not really a pre-Victorian idea. There weren't loads of jails in medieval Britain. There weren't loads of prisons in Tudor Britain. There were prisons, but it wasn't everywhere, because people tended to be punished in other ways. So will we look back in 100 years' time and say, I can't believe we used to lock people up? Interesting. Yeah. And will we look back in 100 years' time and say, we used to farm chickens in a big barn and eat them full of antibiotics because we couldn't keep them well, and loads of people just ate them without thinking about it.
Those are both great. I mean, I didn't know about that prison example, and that's fascinating as well. And I love to think about that. What are we doing now that will be considered abhorrent? And there will be something. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's that Simon Amstell thing about the vegan thing. I think he made some sort of documentary, mockumentary about the future, looking back at us. From that point of view, really, really interesting. I just know that when I used to eat meat, if somebody would have given me a whole guilt thing, I didn't listen. But even when I ate meat, I thought, oh God, don't think about it, just do it. And I think most people do that. And I want everyone listening now to know I don't judge anyone. No. I get it. I'm not here to
but why would you eat a cow but not a dog?
Yeah.
I thought that's an interesting question in itself. But asking questions, I mean, you don't have to come up with an answer, but that strikes me as the thing that heretics, positive, plausible heretics should do, and say, why do we do that? First principles.
Well, this is when I've lost people, and I think it's a luxury position to be in, to be a true, the heretic I described at the beginning of, okay, you're having a go at these, but then you're on all the different sides, and you're no one's tribe. That's a bit of a luxury position, because if you do that when you've got 10 subscribers, you don't grow. But when you've got, let's say, 1 million or 500,000 or whatever it is, you start growing, you can start taking stands like that, I think. You can start saying so recently I felt a lot of pushback. A lot of Jewish people follow me, of course, because I'm pro-Israel. I don't talk about Israel much on the podcast, actually, but because they know I am, and there's this, oh, he's on our side kind of thing. But then recently I said, well, kosher meat has got to stop, because it's horrific.
Yeah.
It's horrific. The pushback I've got has been horrific, worse than ever, because they think I'm in their tribe.
You've let them down.
Yeah.
But it's mad that you would agree about everything with a group of geographically disparate people. That's why religion is ultimately so unconvincing to the atheist, because it's mad to think that anyone can congregate around a set of beliefs, many of which were orchestrated thousands of years ago. Because why would you agree on that bit, but not that, and that bit, and that bit, and that bit? You must be free to challenge all sorts of bits.
That's exactly what I think. And I think if we're going to say halal meat is not right, then we have to say the same about kosher. People will push back now. They'll be in the comments. They get very angry at me, and they say, no, you have to realize kosher meat, it's not done this way, it's not done that way. I've looked into it, and it is. And kosher meat, more than halal, kosher meat is 100%, they don't stun the animal first. I mean, stunning is horrible anyway, but it's better than the alternative of not stunning. And halal is something like 87% are stunned. Now, there are many, many more Muslims in the country, so it ends up being more halal meat causing that kind of suffering.
And there's lots of places that are now halal meat without even telling you about it.
Yeah.
So that's true. So just stuff you have is halal meat, which, again, I didn't sign up for.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing, that in order to be welcoming and inclusive, which is a good thing, you might say, well, the easiest thing to do here is to make everything halal. Well, that's interesting, because...
But then the suffering, unless it is the halal that is stunned, then fine. I mean, I interviewed Richard Dawkins on stage recently, which was a privilege to be able to do. And I asked him, do you think animals have a capacity to suffer in the way that we do? And he said he actually believes they probably suffer more than we do, because they're in the wild. Because there is this kind of, the fight or flight, it makes sense that they would have more warning signs. That's what suffering is. It's a warning sign that you're about to be killed. So they really, really can suffer. Psychologically, it's obviously different, because if we're suffering for days and days and we're thinking, they're not doing quite the same thing. But what they actually do, if you see a video of the halal or kosher slaughter, I mean, I've accidentally seen those things sometimes, and it's just... dreadful.
We could go on for hours. I do want to raise one other thing before I let you go, because it's so enjoyable, this conversation. But you've written this book, Psychology of Secrets, My Adventures with Murderers, Cults and Influencers. It's really interesting, and a lot of it's what we're talking about, the same thing we've been talking about already. There's an amazing chapter on paedophiles, where you speak to a couple, which is quite weird in itself, because there aren't very many female paedophiles.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do is find... And so the heretical question is, why is someone a paedophile? Is it innate? Is it environmental? Is it a combination of innate and environmental? And if it is something innate, is punishment of paedophiles the correct answer, or is rehabilitation, management, chemical castration? How do you deal with this? It's a difficult subject, though, because I've got kids, and people will turn around, and I would say the same thing. If someone did anything came anywhere near my kids, I wouldn't want to work out the troubles in their background or consider their genetic identity. I wouldn't want to think like that. And I totally understand that. And yet it's a problem. It's prevalent. It exists in the society. How do we try and understand the best way of treating paedophiles?
It's an interesting question. And it's, people get rightly triggered, let's say, by this topic, and then suspicious, because they're already feeling on edge. People listening now, something will have happened in their brain, they're feeling on edge, and then there's suspicion, and it's like, why are you even talking about this? Are you one of these? So the first thing to say is it's 1 in 100 men. So most men who have the attraction, or
1 in 100,
or the condition, or the mental illness, 1 in 100 men it's believed to be. It can be a bit higher. It's 1 in 100 men who have an exclusive attraction to children, and then 4 to 5% it's believed sort of are a bit attracted to children, but can have normal relationships with adults. Now, most of those people you don't need to worry about. It's the ones who only are attracted to kids that you have to really worry about. So I would say, firstly, 1 in 100 men. So when someone is talking to you about it, it's very unlikely they are one. It's 99% likely they are not one. So the suspicion just, and then the other thing to say is, by understanding these men, mostly men, only by understanding them can we try to curb the assaults that are happening on children.
Or even the use of abuse photographs, because they are then, even if they're not doing it, they are feeding someone else who's doing it.
Absolutely. So we need to do something about these men rather than just close our eyes and ears. And I guess that's why maybe it's the ultimate heretical topic, because you're putting yourself on a ledge and you're going, look at everyone on a platform and you're saying, I want to talk about this. And people are going, why? What's wrong with you? And you're saying, I want to stop or curb, you'll never stop, attacks on children. And that is what the state-sponsored clinic in Germany does. That's where I lived when I was there, and I was looking for what will be my next topic. And they've got what was at the time anyway the only therapy that doesn't do mandatory reporting for paedophiles. So it doesn't report them to police, which obviously is very controversial. Yeah. But it's the only way they'll come in for therapy. So if it's the only way to get them in and then teach them about their own cognitive biases, and it stops, some attacks on children, then it's worth it, I think. And that's what they argue anyway. And it's not even that controversial in Germany. I think most people are behind that. They support that. What happens, again, it's this cultist groupthink. If you just say, no, kill them, which everyone says. Well, firstly, okay, fine, but how are you going to identify all of them? You can't just go around killing them. But secondly, those who are maybe fighting with their horrible urges will see that. And it's just the typical human reaction. They will retreat into their corners and find others like them, and then they tell one another, yes, they're their own tribe who love bomb one another, and then they will say to one another, you know what, it happened to me when I was a kid, which is often the case. It wasn't that bad. I quite liked it. No. And they tell one another. I mean, most people don't want to be a horrible, evil person.
So is it innate then? Is there any recognition? Is it something that you're born with?
I think we know as much as we do about homosexuality. Yeah. I mean, it might be. There are all sorts of different theories about it. Some say there's kind of like you stop the moment you were abused. I mean, that might make sense in the case. You stop your growth, I mean.
Yes.
Michael Jackson might be a good example. He remained...
So the environment can trigger it in a way.
Yeah, he remained a child from the moment he was being abused. And he's a particularly interesting example because not just sexually, but physically, as a person, he remained a child. And it seems to stall your progression. A 10-year-old child is attracted to another 10-year-old, an 11-year-old to another 11-year-old, and so on. The rest of us keep going until we're in our 20s, and it's funny to see it even happening as I get older now. When I was 20, I would look at a 36-year-old as I am, like, oh god, sort of old mum or teacher or something. And now it's like, I can look at a 50-year-old now.
I had exactly this conversation. The great thing about growing old is that older people, your attractions grow with you. And I remember, because also I've got a 16, my oldest is 16. So anyone under the age of 25 looks like a child to me.
Yeah.
So you move up a grade each time, don't you? So I'm 45, and so I find people in their 40s and 50s attractive.
Most of us do. Leonardo DiCaprio probably doesn't.
He probably doesn't. No, yeah, exactly. So the answer is, we should probably have a more honest conversation about why people are paedophiles, and then find a way of stopping them from acting on it.
Yeah, and make a bigger. Distinguish better between those who have acted and those who haven't. I mean, the therapy is called Don't Offend. The point is the offence. I heard Joe Rogan talking about this, and I think he got this utterly wrong. And he was talking about paedophiles, and he's going, why are people defending And it's like, no one's defending the people who have acted. That would be mad. And they should have longer sentences, by the way. I mean,
from a protection point of view.
Well, yeah, but if they come back out and they offend again, but also because is there a more abominable crime? I mean, I think Hugh, and I'm not just saying this as a kind of culture war point, but Hugh Edwards should have seen the inside of a jail, particularly when people, for free speech aspects, which are horrible as well, are going away for 31 months.
Yeah.
You don't even put someone who's been trading photos of children in a prison. That is mad. However, there are people who suffer with this or whatever it is who have never offended. And it's thought to be the majority of them. So even if you don't care, I'm not saying let's sympathise with them, because that's another point. Okay, you don't have to sympathise with those people. It doesn't matter. The point is that all of those people might at some point give in to their urges and offend. So we should at least talk about it and try to sort of disabuse them of their cognitive biases.
I think so, and also I just think asking the question: how much is it innate? How much is it society? You ask about all crime.
It's a bit of everything.
It's a bit of everything. But I mean, does someone who has a perfect childhood have exactly the same chances and bear the same responsibility for their actions as someone who grows up in an abusive, impoverished, deprived place? And quite obviously, they don't. Now, where you draw your lines there and what that means for crime and punishment and attribution of blame and morality are all very difficult questions. But you don't answer them by not asking them.
Savile had a terrible childhood. You
Yeah.
know? I mean, he's the ultimate paedophile, isn't he? He's the worst, or one of the worst. And he had a terrible childhood and nearly died as a young child. I think it was tuberculosis or pneumonia, something like that. Very strange mum, very strange relationship with his mum. Just all of that. So maybe some of it was genetic in him. And maybe, you know, we don't know. But it was a range of weird things in his childhood.
Asking the question, I think it's so important. And listen, we better stop now because otherwise we carry on because we're not going to solve all the world's problems here, Andrew. I don't think. I've really enjoyed it though. Thank you so much for joining us. The podcast you'll be very familiar with. It is called Heretics. The book is called The Psychology of Secrets. Andrew Gold is an internet star. Very grateful for you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
This is Thinkers on Times Radio. Thank you for watching. You know what to do if you want to leave comments. I know they'll be thoughtful and respectful and engage with the nuance, go beneath the line, and you can follow and subscribe us. And we'll carry on doing this. You know, find some interesting people and talk at length about what makes them interesting, what makes the world interesting as well. Thank you so much for joining us.